Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 21st video in the series of reflections on the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 16, verses 1, 2, and 3. If you haven't already, please take a look at the introductory video. It tells you what this series is all about. And if also you haven't, probably would be good to at least pick some of your favorite words from the videos that have come before, some of the qualities that we're looking at, just to get a sense of what's gone on before. Now, if you've watched any of them, you know, of course, we always begin with a chance to rest and just let a lot of the cares of the day, let them go, okay? And I leave you to your favorite way of doing this. I use a very shortened version here because it's not too interesting watching somebody sit with their eyes closed. Very shortened version of an exercise from the School of Practical Philosophy. So with that said, just come to rest. Good, ladies and gentlemen. As I said, in reality, you should probably take about 2 or 3 minutes of just pausing, just coming to rest, just letting everything settle down. But for the purposes of moving this along, we leave it as a short time. So, 21st video, we are coming up to the last word of the second verse. What I think this would be a good time to do is take a look at where we've gone in this second verse, and I'm just going to read through the words and not the definitions, just the words in the quick translation. So we started the second verse with ahimsa, which was harmlessness, and then we went on to satyam, given as truth, akrodha, absence of anger. Could really use that one right now. Looked at tyaga, renunciation, shanti, serenity or peace. Apaisuna, which was absence of calumny or absence of malice, would be the way we might understand that better. We looked at daya bhuteshu, compassion to all beings. Excuse me here. And we looked at alaluptvam, which was uncovetousness, not coveting. It's a tricky one. And the video right before us, the happiest 20th anniversary video, was on 2 words. We did madhavam, gentleness, and modesty. I don't know if I would call that a successful video or not. It is what comes out. My feeling, and I haven't looked over the whole video yet, is it was... It didn't flow, but that was because 2 things. One, little question around some of the definitions given in the Sanskrit dictionary on madhavam, gentleness, and then number 2, modesty being, at least in my opinion, and I would rather hope that somebody else would do a video and say, no, you're, probably the only person out here right now hoping that somebody does a set of videos and says, yeah, you're really wrong, and here's the proof, So I'm looking forward to anybody who's doing that. So, gentleness, modesty, and let's do our typical cheap, don't have to edit anything, hold up here, achapalam. Can I get that right? Achapalam, yes. And that's given as absence of fickleness. So, what we're going to do is what I've been doing on most of these is let's take a look at the Sanskrit to English translations and see what comes up of that. And we know we have words. Sometimes words are compound words, and then all of them eventually get to some root. That's the starting point for that. So achapalam, we've already talked about the ms and the twams and the ahs and everything that's at the front and the back of them to help shape the word. But achapala is the actual word. And I just see a little error in here. picking up Sanskrit errors is tough. Achapala, not oscillating, not wavering, not fickle, unmovable, steady. And by the way, if I didn't read it before, absence of fickleness is given in the Gita that I'm using as the English translation. So achapala, not oscillating, not wavering, not fickle, unmovable, steady. And we get from that, without the is chapala, which is given in definition as mobility, swiftness, agitation, unsteadiness, fickleness, inconsiderateness, insolence. Okay. And chapa, again, we're kind of narrowing down, and as I had mentioned before, you kind of have to work backwards in the Sanskrit dictionary to find the words that these things are being put together from. We have chapa, a bow, an arc, a kind of astronomical instrument, and derivative words give us bow-armed, Sagittarius, which I believe is the archer, stringing and bending a bow. And chapal ya, again, all in the same area of the dictionary, agitation, unsteadiness, fickleness, flurry. Finally, after all those words, we get down to the root, which is chal. Now, this also has alternate roots suggested, and if I don't have them here, it means I looked at them and I didn't think that they apply. Sometimes the alternate roots help fill out the word. In this case, I don't think they do. But chal, the root for achalpalam, is to be moved, stir, tremble, shake, quiver, be agitated, palpitate, to move on or forward, proceed, go away, start off, depart. There's a long list of words, but they all kind of have this idea of either it's this flurry idea or starting, but they're all some form of movement. And as we say, a lot of times in these, okay, I mean, almost all of these words are in themselves neutral. There are times when we need to either be steady, and times where maybe we need to have a little bit of movement or agitation to get things going. So remember, as given as the godly quality, we're looking at absence of fickleness. Now, again, partly it's age, but and partly it's just that TV, for anybody probably even under 70 now, even 80, is just such a big part of our lives. I mean, even growing up in the, 60s and 70s, that's what you did at night. You watched TV. Now, of course, there's, millions of channels available, plus YouTube. Shout out to YouTube here. But when I hear the word fickle, I can only think of Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In. They used to give out the Flying Fickle Finger of Fate award. Oddly enough, and I'm going to have to try to remember some of them, either that or just go to YouTube, but they were usually for really stupid things that happened. And although it's not in here, although inconsiderateness gives you some of that sense, what we are talking about with fickleness is a real loose cannon, as it were. And again, we're going to go back and apply these qualities to us humans here. We're talking about somebody who, one day here, one day there, the other day there. Now, again, always tricky. You want to be in the moment. You want to react to what's needed at the moment. If if your kid comes running up to you, the old, mommy, wait, and is there anybody bleeding? No, okay, just go get a Band-Aid and put it on. Versus, mommy, the house is on fire, and everybody gets into action. You do need to be responsive to what's in the moment. So what's the difference between that and this fickle quality that we're talking about, this oscillating, this very unsteady quality that's all listed here? Well, one of the things we may not realize is how much we depend on our fellow human beings for everything that we need to do to carry out in this life, our living. And we rather depend that when we go to our favorite place to get breakfast in the morning or lunch, or movie theaters are coming back. I think we can finally go to them again. But whatever the case is, in a way, there is an expectation that the things that we count on are there from day to day and stay that way. And that if I have a favorite place, let's say it's my favorite Italian restaurant, that I don't come in next week, and it might be just like, well, we decided we're going to be a Chinese restaurant now. You know, okay, and I'll give it a try, and you turn out you like it, and then 3 weeks later, well, now we're going to be a Greek restaurant. I mean, it wouldn't be very pleasing to you to have something that's constantly changing, can't make up their mind. I mean, you can see it again going back to a restaurant. You look over the menu and, you make 15 different decisions. Now that's kind of, at least it is for me. I do not know when I go into a restaurant. I mean, if I go into an Italian restaurant, I'm pretty sure it's going to be a pasta or pizza, but I don't come into a restaurant. It drives the waitresses and waiters crazy, because everybody else apparently on this planet eats things. I mean, they talk about absence of fickleness. They come in every morning. It's 2 eggs scrambled on Monday. Tuesday, 2 eggs scrambled. Wednesday, 2 eggs scrambled. That's just not me. So I guess you could say I'm fickle, not displaying this quality. But, that's, joking aside about that, you are looking for a certain amount of steadiness. And I think that the area where you would see this most is in our employment. When one talks about a good manager, a bad manager, one of the qualities that would be there, what we would consider a good manager, is, going back to this kind of steadfastness. Hold on 1 minute, people. Okay, we're back. We're talking about managers, and one of the qualities I think we would all desire in somebody that we have to work with on a daily basis, especially somebody who's kind of in charge of our raises and how much money we get, is you really want that steadiness there, that they're not playing favorites, that the events of the day, let's say they're at home and whatever, the dog peed on the floor or something, that they don't come in and bring that, and they kind of have this agitation about them. You really want this kind of like this straight as an arrow quality about them. And so the idea of absence of fickleness as a quality, and remember, I said before, we're talking about the godly qualities, but these really ultimately turn out to be qualities of humans. In fact, Krishna basically says as much after giving these. We'll see this again, this is the end of verse 2. We'll see this at 3, and maybe when we get to the end of verse 3, we'll read a little bit of ahead. But basically, Krishna says as much, that these are qualities of each of us, and we could either live in these qualities, or, as he'll go on to give quite a list of the demonic qualities. And this absence of fickleness, I think, is something that even if we don't think of it that way, it's something that we really desire out of everybody else. Just like way back when we talked about wanting to deal with people who are honest and upright and have our best interests at heart. Well, one way that that's possible is you are dealing with people, I come back to strong and weak, people who are not so weak that they don't get tossed about by every idea that comes into their head, or they're still running on something that happened yesterday, which may have had nothing to do with you, but is influencing their actions towards you today. So if I had a lot of trouble with modesty and shame, the word before, I don't think that there's any difficulty for any of us understanding absence of fickleness. We are probably longing, right after somebody who's speaking the truth to us, who's being honest with us, who's having our best interest at heart. Really, if somebody says, well, are they steady? Are they not wavering? Are they not agitated all the time? That would certainly be a quality that we're going to desire in how people treat us. And of course, we've also been saying since the beginning of these that you will do an immense amount of good to those around you, especially your loved ones, who, as we always say, bear the brunt of our our fickleness, if you were steady, if everything that happens to you didn't throw you off the train tracks, didn't cause this, flurry. And in fact, I believe this is where I'm not going to go back to the commentary right now. It could take a little while to find it. But I believe that this is not excessive waving of hands and stuff like that. And I was like, huh? But, an agitated person is always looking agitated. Most people don't understand. They go, now, you can a bit and be agitated in mind, but mostly it comes out into the physical world. And you could tell, in fact, usually, again, you're talking about, when people see you and they detour around the street so that they don't have to run into you, well, it's because you look like you're ready to bite somebody's head off. You're so agitated. And so we're talking about absence of fickleness here, not oscillating, not wavering, not fickle, unmovable and steady. And as with all of these, we have to be careful. Moderation is the key, because unmovable and steady is great for rocks and the foundation of your skyscrapers in New York City or Los Angeles. But you got to be careful that you don't become a fossil or a living fossil, which I think is an oxymoron too. But so unmovable, so steady that nothing can get in. And this is a tricky line, because you may have to be very unmovable and steady in the face of a lot, and you may not know. I'm not too sure about that. Speaking of TV, as we were at the beginning, was a great series on leaders of World War II or something like that. Churchill and de Gaulle both faced terrific opposition in their own cabinets to all the things to standing up to Hitler, because nobody does anything better than, yeah, okay, he said he's not going to do that good. I don't have to think about that. Now, let's see, I've got a golf appointment or whatever. And, to be unmovable and steady when it's really needed, and to understand when it's needed and when it's a hindrance, is a challenge. And if you can meet that challenge, you will probably do great things for your country, but it doesn't even have to be at that level. It could be your family, your community, your state, your nation. But there is a time to be unmovable and steady, and you also need to watch in that state that you're not being pig-headed. It's so many of these, so many. I could probably go back to the beginning now and take all of these and look at that fine line from where they become a godly quality to where they become an impediment to those around you. And I don't think in any of these, I don't think so. Now hold on, I promised I wasn't going to do this, but Yeah, I just took a quick look at verse 3. I don't think in any of these that Krishna actually specifically calls out wakefulness, presence, being in the moment. But for all of these qualities to retain their godliness, it's necessary that we stay awake, we stay present, we actually see what's going on. And this is the importance, I think, probably purity of being and purity of heart, as I said, could use about 10 more videos each, but the importance of cleaning up the upstream so that the downstream is pure, so that what comes out of your mouth is pure, so that your thoughts are pure, is just paramount in all of these. And the reason it's paramount is so that what's a godly quality doesn't become in a way, almost a demonic quality. You know, I'm not moving. I've made up my mind and that's it. It's work. All of these are a bit of work on the part of each of us. They're not sleepy time qualities. And we need to work. I mean, that's what it comes down to. It's part of the reason why you get a seventh day to rest, and because you need to work, you need to do what's been given to you, what's been put in your care, whether it's people around you, things around you, the world around you, and in order to do that, you must be awake, and as you know, as is said often in the Gospels, you know, let all those who have ears to hear hear. You need to be present and know what's going on, and to think that somehow or another it's kind of like the, you know, we talked about the covetousness, that, you know, to think that you can, you know, I'll do it all now. I mean, it's kind of like the idea of, well, if I just eat, you know, if I eat for 24 hours, I'm covered for the next month. It doesn't work like that. Active participation in the process of transformation. I think that was, I'm quoting Miss Dillingham right there. Nobody's coming in and doing this for us. The only person who's doing anything, well, I'll point back here. I mean, my work's my work, your work's your work. But being steady, being straight, just being kind of a rock. And you know, you're back to Christianity and Peter as the rock. I mean, not being built upon shifting sands here. That is something that, you know, as they say, well, you know, you can put your money on that and take it to the bank. It is a tremendous service to the community. When I say community, I'm meaning minimally the world, okay? A tremendous service to the community to be steady, and all the other qualities that we've talked about here. But more important, I'm going to go back to the root here, not trembling, quivering, agitating, going away, starting off, become confused or disordered. You know, the rule is, well, the rule for service is always from the higher to the lower, despite any other idea out there. And if I haven't mentioned this before, I'll do that now. I cannot run at 60 miles an hour, you know, so that I can go away on vacation at the Jersey Shore. So I need a car. The car is, if you will, superior to me in that. On the other hand, the car can't change its own oil. So either I do that or I bring it to somebody who knows how to do that. in which case, I'm superior to the car at that point. But regardless of the direction, there is a need for this, if you will, the godly, the more human qualities to be at the service of those in need. And so we are, much the same way that we talked about, shoveling your sidewalk, right? To keep clear the king's way, okay? So this is why you got to take these in order, okay? You're not only keeping the king's way clear physically, but mentally or in the heart. And so if you have people in your care, and that includes your family, they're in your care, in whatever way you see that, but they are in your care. Well, your duty, I know we love our rights in America, but you don't get your rights until you do your duties. One of the difficulties is people claiming rights without doing their duty. Well, one of your duties is to care for those who you say you love, and since you should be loving everybody anyway, one of your duties as a human is compassion to all creatures, care, not cause everything that we've had, not causing harm, not hating, not being angry with. All of these, and I you look at this and you say, well, where is this all going? Why is this being done? Why are we repeating the same things over and over again? There are different ways of saying the same thing, and that answers, somebody said the only parable that has really stuck with people is the one of the Good Samaritan, which was actually an answer to who is my neighbor, which was, which itself was part of an answer to, what shall I do? Love thy neighbor as thyself. And who is my neighbor? It's every one of us. It's every one of us. And being there steady for somebody, is quite a high calling, actually, and quite a beautiful, and we're back to the beauty, the gentle, the beautiful and gracious thing to do, that you could be there for people. You could be there as their taker of their cares. Take their care. What a gorgeous and beautiful thing to be able to lift somebody's cares. Might not be permanent, but even for a short amount of time. Just think of when a loved one of yours has passed away, and the people who come by to help in that. And I can come back to, why would that be considered a terrible thing to I gotta get this right. Why wouldn't you want to do what is caretaking of those around you? And I say that only because, again, the response to something like what I'm saying here is usually, but that's not the real world. And the more that one reflects upon these, the more I see that, there's a mistake being made here, that what people are calling the real world is actually the world of shaking, agitation, palpitations, disturbance, confusion, what have you. And, this particular word is saying that, again, with this idea of turning, that we are not agitated all the time, that we are not shaking and quivering. Now, again, every one of these things may have a time and a place. But if oh my goodness, I remember right at the start of this COVID thing, we were, as I said, my dad's 85 years old, and he goes, it's not a bad thing, he just, with him, anything that's out of the usual, we end up at the hospital, just because you need to get it checked out right away. If he was a 20-year-old guy again, yeah, we'll get him and we'll check it. But, and I remember that on the way to the hospital, we had known about this very big accident right out on the road there. And while we're sitting there in the emergency room, who comes in? But it turns out to be the mother and father of one of the girls who was in the car. Now, fortunately, she did not get killed, but when that lady came in, and I couldn't imagine it myself, the state that you would be in, not knowing yet the fate of your own child in what you know has been a terrible car accident, and people have been killed. I had to admire, they talk about frontline workers right now, had to really admire the lady sitting at the desk there who said, okay, let's look, okay, I'll see. And, she hits a button and somebody else comes out, who says, okay, let's come in, we have some information, and what have you. Very calm, very gentle, very compassionate, and very steady. And the last thing you need when you have heard such a horrible bit of news is somebody to be in a wavering, oscillating, unsteady, and it says inconsiderate here, an inconsiderate state. So, again, that had a happier ending for their daughter, not so for some of the other people, but I don't understand, and when somebody can provide this service and this level of care, why people insist that that's not the real world. And I've said it before, no, it's dog eat dog, and every person for themselves. I told the story of the big long chopsticks. You can't feed yourself with 6, but you can feed others. And I'm not quite sure this absence of fickleness, and I'm not sure if this is the definition of gentleness or something else, but it certainly comes through as being there for other beings, and not oscillating, not wavering, not fickle. Yeah, the last thing that you need in your life is somebody who decides things, based upon who just insulted them, or on a whim, or today I like you, tomorrow I don't like you. Oh, will you be my friend on Thursday? Nobody wants that. I think I'm going to stop here, and we'll come back, of course, for part 2 and see what else that brings. But I do think that this is something that we understand in our hearts, and so it is a little bit easier. But again, there's always a chance to reflect a little bit more. So we'll put this on pause right now. I'll take my few minutes, you get your few seconds, and we'll be back in a little bit for part 2. Hello, and welcome back to part 2. We are looking at the last word in verse 2, which is achapalam, which is given as absence of fickleness. Now, I think that in the first half, we did a good job of covering the quality of this, and really on a lot of these, what happens is it's easier to reflect upon the opposite quality. So, for one who isn't fickle, well, what are we looking at? We know we're looking at, this kind of steadiness, not oscillating, immovable, steady. And we, at least I, again, I always have to say that these are opinions, so, okay, well, those are generally considered good qualities. But as with all of these, they are qualities of the moment. And I just wanted to get to some of the other definitions all the way down there at the root, which has a root of chal, as we said before. And I may not have read all of them because, and you can see the definitions go on quite a bit down there at the bottom. It's quite a long list. But towards the end, we have swerve, deviate from, to sport about, frolic, and play. Okay? And of course, we're looking at the root, not the whole word, but that in this sense of the word, the roots of the word, yeah, we have this idea of a lot of activity, but we also have this kind of glimmer of this playfulness, so that again, I don't know if I'm a 7 or 8 year old boy or girl. Yeah, you get all this kind of playfulness because you're a kid and you don't really have to worry anything. Of course, there's a huge amount of fickleness at that age because, I'm not your friend anymore. I'm going to take my toys and go home, whatever. And then, of course, the very next day, poof, it's gone. So it's not to say on any of these words that they're good or bad in and of themselves. It's always, and I think that's the one thing here, it's always, what does the quality look like in action? And in action depends upon the moment. I don't know if I can emphasize enough that what we're looking at here is not, I could put together a document and have these words and read them and but the first thing was their action produces, these series of videos. Now what they really should produce in me is actually doing some of them. But all of these, when we look at the roots of these things especially, all of these come from some form of activity, and they represent, the roots always represent some sort of verb. Told you I'm not an English major here, okay? Some sort of action. So whether the action is quivering, shaking, or it's just pure frolic, pure playfulness and stuff like that, squirrels chasing each other around. That's all part of this. It's all of these things that are part of the creation itself. And so I just always worry about this, especially sometimes when it either gets serious or when certain of this runs up against current trends in thought, that people say, well, yeah, this is a fine and dandy list if you want to live like that, as if it were a terrible thing. And I kind of hope that these reflections are showing that quite the opposite would be true, that if one were compassionate to your fellow beings, honest, kind, wise, pure, steady with them, okay? That, in fact, it would be a more beneficial state both for you and those around you. But it doesn't at all ever take away from the fact that there's millions of things to do here in the creation. And certainly sporting about, frolicking, playing, it's half of it, again, at least in America. Unfortunately, a lot of countries, if you're living at such a terrible poverty level, that you don't have time to sport about. You're worrying about surviving. We are incredibly fortunate here in America that, even if they're not having the fans in the stands, they manage to get the Indy 500 going. Whatever the thing is, whatever the activity is, it's part and parcel of being a human being and living here on the planet. But the best use of this is in action, in how you deal with everybody else. And if you are the type of person that nobody would come to because, I never know what this guy's going to say. He's, one day, it runs hot and cold, I think is, excuse me, I think is one of the phrases on here. Runs hot and cold, I think, is one of the phrases here. you just need to see all of these in action, and the question always is, are they useful? Are they more productive of peace and happiness for yourself or those around you? I mean, I think that's why they're called the godly qualities here. And again, I'll be happy when we get to the end of this. I think we're going to do a little bit of lessons learned, and I'll read ahead. I mean, it's a pretty gruesome list that Krishna gives. As I said before, I don't think that he had any delusions. I mean, he's here in the middle of going to be a great war where, half the world's going to get killed off. I don't think that he has any delusions about how people can act. But it doesn't mean that you just go, well, what can I do about it? Well, for one, you can just remind people, oh yeah, there's another way of looking at life. And in fact, it may be more real than what we tend to call the real world, this kind of dog-eat-dog world that we just love to call the real world. And there may be other things to do. You may need to, volunteer at the food bank, or give out cook meals for the homeless, or even take your beautiful commercial on TV now of the people helping the old people. See, I'm too politically correct here. Helping, some of the people who are elderly and cannot drive anymore, get them to their doctor so that they can get necessary care. There is no lack of what can be done to help each of us as we travel through whatever time of life we have here. It would be, I think, useful, and thus, again, this series of videos, to hear some of these words and to hear, because we know it's part and parcel of being a human, but because so many other ideas and thoughts get to be repeated over and over again, we lose sight of, not wavering, not being fickle, being unmovable and steady, especially when so many are in need of that. So I think, I don't want to belabor the point. Some may say I've already done so. But as far as verse 2 goes, ending on absence of fickleness, I think that it's really a nice set of qualities that could bring peace and happiness to those who we interact with. Again, the best test of any of this is, if somebody were acting like this to me, would I be happy? Would I be annoyed? And the more that the answer is yes, if I was doing that, people were doing that, I'd be happy, they're happy. A little lifting up from the very tough times that we're living in would be much appreciated. So, as I've said before, get out there and get going, people. Okay, it's not all just sitting watching these videos. You got to get out there. If you want to volunteer at some place, if that's how you do it, do it. If you want to reflect upon these yourselves, I mean, you can find the Gita in 2 seconds out on the internet, and just, my reflections are my reflections. You might see these words and go, okay, yeah, whatever. It's kind of hard to express, but the general, the pushback, because that's what it is for me. I always get a pushback on these things. Again, not the real world. What do you know? It's doggy dog. But there's a certain amount of despair, or what can I do? That there's nothing I can do. It's so overwhelming and so big, and I don't think that that's true at all. Nobody, you don't have to, and you're not able. Nobody is able to anyway. Change the entire world like that. But you can do what you can do. And again, as I said before, you look at the national news every night. The last few minutes are always devoted to some inspiring story of people doing what they can do to help those around them, to help lift the level of the community, it doesn't have to be earth-shattering. You can start a little bit at a time. And no, I don't know if I've done the two birds story. Beautiful, another beautiful. The abundance, people, how many times the abundance of grace and what we have available is greater than we could ever use in 1,000 or even 1,000,000 lifetimes. And yet, I have to be sitting here and have to keep saying about it. We start where we are. Anything can be done. It's within your power. And by the way, you don't have to just start. So getting back to the two birds story, Two Birds in the Sea, I believe is what it's called. So there were two birds who lived by the sea, and they had a small nest and 3 or 4 eggs in it. And there was a terrible storm one evening, and the next morning the birds found that by the storm the sea had come up to the level of where their nest was, and the water pulled their eggs of their to-be family out into the ocean. And the two birds began, immediately after seeing that, they began running to the sea, picking up a little water and dropping it over by the land. And run to the sea, pick up a little water and dropping it, and so on and so forth. And this went on for quite a while. Now it so happened, as Miss Dillingham would say, a wise man happened to be passing by, and in these stories there's always a wise man, passing by, and watched the activity of the birds taking the water out of the sea and dumping it onto the land. Finally curious, he went over and said to the birds, what are you doing? And the birds explained the whole story about how the sea had stolen their eggs and their future family, and that they were going to drain the sea. They were going to get the water out of the sea, and once the sea was drained, they'd be able to get their eggs from the bottom. And the wise man said, okay, I see, and turned to the sea and basically said to the sea, you need to return the eggs. Now this sea, recognizing the power of the wise man who was making the request, deposited the eggs back on the shore for the birds. And the birds thanked the wise man, and the wise man went on his way. And now, it's not a story about talking birds. It's not a story about people talking to birds. It's not a story about how the sea recognizes a wise person. It's the story about how the creation will come to those who are trying, even in a little bit. Even in a little bit. You don't have any idea of what's possible, as long as your mindset is, what can I do? Do anything. Anything. Okay? Anything's better than nothing. And I mean in the right direction. Going out and shooting people, and who knows what else, displaying the ungodly, displaying the demonic. We're going to have to read those soon. Not that. But it is entirely within your power, and not you as the individual, because you as the individual would be like the two birds. You need 1,000,000 lifetimes to empty the sea, and it ain't going to work that way. But it's the sincerity, it's the honesty, it's the uprightness of the action that carries the day and brings the full force of creation to your aid. It's as simple as that. The difficulty is we'd rather go, I don't know. Oh boy, are we a bunch of pouting babies? And the creation does not respond to pouting babies. But get up there. Oh, this is so great. I'm looking ahead, right? Because I wanted to read this is so great. Well, I guess maybe they are in the right order. So the pouting babies and sitting across. What's needed is a little bit of energy and fortitude. A couple of the words coming up here. A little bit of vim and vigor, as they say. And in fact, with that, let's just see what's coming, because we just finished up verse 2. We're going to move on to verse 3, of which really it's really only half of verse 3. Okay, and then Krishna gets to explain a few other things. So coming up in video number 386 or whatever we're up to here, okay, we're getting energy, forgiveness, fortitude, purity, absence of hatred, absence of pride. These belong to one born for a divine lot, O Bharata. Now, energy is tejas, or teja. Again, just because of the way that they go in the sentence. Yeah, and that is got, in fact, that's probably one of the more interesting. We've kind of, its root, we've kind of gotten to a little bit here. Yeah. Sorry, because I get to look at this because I already wrote these. So we will pick up the next video with energy, tejas. And it doesn't have to be, a whole, again, famous corporate saying, we're not trying to boil the ocean here. It doesn't need to be that. We can just be fine by the side of the ocean, put up a little pot, and see what comes to our aid in that sort of stuff. So there you have it. Ooh, we were all over the place in these last couple, but I think that's just what happens with these. You don't know where they're going to go to, but I still stay with my original contention that it is useful to have an alternate sound out there. If you have somebody who is constantly lying, constantly trying to bring harm to people, the opposite of all of these things, I think that you will not want to be around such a person. And if you're the person doing that, I assure you people do not want to be around you. I can unfortunately speak from my own experience in that. So, none of us are without sin, as the saying goes here. On the other hand, that is not ever, that whatever has been done is not a bar to what a prison, a holding back of what's possible. So unless this is why, remember Lot's wife, do not turn around to that. Keep going forward. Don't worry about what's been done or not done. We've all got skeletons in the closet, okay? And those will be worked out. But pick up from now with a little bit of energy and fire, as we're going to get to, and take it from there. So with that, I say we will see you on verse 3 on the next video. In the meantime, don't forget the cute cat videos. I have to put dogs in. We raised dogs when we were young, so we have cats now because it's just easier. But so I'll put in a plug for both on this one, okay? Cute cat, cute dog videos out on the internet. If none of this appeals to you, and I don't know how you would have stayed this long here anyway if it didn't. So until next time, enjoy. Be kind to everybody, please.